There are moments when two seemingly unrelated worlds collide, and the result is something so explosive, so undeniably charged with tension, that it forces the entire public eye to split in two. On one side, the opulent, image-obsessed, and increasingly chaotic world of Hollywood. On the other, the ever-scrutinized, tightly wound, politically precarious realm of global diplomacy and European power. And caught in the crossfire under parallel microscopes, facing mounting pressure from media insiders and the public, are two women who couldn't be more different in persona, yet eerily alike in circumstance: Blake Lively and Brigitte Macron. This week both have been hit hard: headlines, hashtags, viral tweets, whispers in elite circles. And whether intentional or coincidental, the fact remains they've both just been double served. Blake Lively, once the darling of the red carpet and the social queen of celebrity motherhood, now finds herself entangled in a legal, cultural, and personal firestorm that seems to grow more intense by the hour. What began as an eyebrow-raising defamation case has escalated into a full-on Hollywood scandal, dragging in names like Justin Baldoni, Taylor Swift, and even her own husband Ryan Reynolds. The once untouchable image of Blake, pristine, witty, charming, is now fraying at the edges. Court filings, leaked texts, uncomfortable footage, everything's been flipped upside down. Her allies are quiet, her enemies are louder than ever, and even the most neutral observers can't deny that something irreversible has shifted in her public narrative. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Brigitte Macron, France's First Lady, known for her elegance, her grace, and yes, the constant chatter about her unconventional marriage to President Emmanuel Macron, has been facing a storm of her own. While the context is entirely different, the intensity of the backlash feels disturbingly familiar. Brigitte has recently become the center of a renewed media obsession, one not rooted in policy or politics but in persona and perception. A Vogue cover here, a controversial public appearance there, a whisper campaign in Parisian cafes questioning her influence over the president. And suddenly she's become the subject of scathing op-eds, viral TikToks dissecting her fashion, and even anonymous claims that she's overstepping into statecraft. Just like Blake, she's caught in the trap of being a woman in power, and a woman the public seems unsure of how to classify. What's so striking is how quickly the media narrative can pivot, and how similarly it unfolds regardless of geography. One moment both women were hailed as inspirational icons, Blake with her wholesome image, philanthropic endeavors, and savvy fashion collaborations; Brigitte, the polished intellectual partner of a modern president, defying ageist norms with dignity and charm. But then the tide turned. For Blake, it was the court documents, those explosive texts, that allegedly revealed far more behind the scenes manipulation than anyone expected. For Brigitte, it was a combination of fatigue from the French public, a resurgent right-wing media campaign targeting her visibility, and whispers of her unofficial advisory role during France's recent crises. And here's the uncomfortable truth: both are being criticized not for crimes or political missteps, but for existing too loudly in the spaces they occupy. For being too visible, too elegant, too calculating, too emotional, too powerful. They are, in essence, being served not just by critics but by a public that seems hungry to see icons fall. And it's not lost on cultural commentators how often this script repeats itself with powerful women. Blake is being dissected on YouTube, framed as both manipulator and victim, with every facial expression and body language movement analyzed for hidden meaning. Brigitte is enduring think pieces about whether she's too involved in Emmanuel Macron's political decisions, as if she should fade into the background and merely pose for photo ops. It's the same formula: uplift, idolize, scrutinize, then destroy. The internet has not helped. Blake's name is trending constantly, and not in the way she used to trend. Videos questioning her friendship with Taylor Swift, TikToks comparing her 2023 red carpet walk to her slouched body language in recent paparazzi footage. Gossip forums speculating on what Ryan Reynolds really thinks. And then there's Brigitte, who now finds herself the subject of bizarre social media conspiracy theories, everything from commentary on her wardrobe budget to unsettling ageist attacks, cloaked in Fox-concerned political language. Neither woman can win. If they speak up, they're accused of being defensive. If they stay silent, it's read as guilt or weakness. But this parallel unraveling goes deeper than surface-level scandal. Both Blake Lively and Brigitte Macron are now case studies in what happens when women who have benefited from glowing media coverage suddenly face a reckoning. Not necessarily because they did something wrong, but because the tide of public opinion needed a new target. The public grows weary of perfection. Audiences that once celebrated them are now demanding something raw, more flawed. And when these women don't crumble fast enough, the criticism intensifies. People want accountability, yes, but increasingly, they also want spectacle. In Blake's case, her downfall feels both rapid and cruel. The lawsuit involving Baldoni has put her in a spotlight, She's not used to not the glossy, carefully curated spotlight of a Chanel campaign, but the harsh glare of depositions, legal analysis, and uncomfortable truths. The fact that her closest allies in the celebrity world are keeping quiet, that's telling. Even Taylor Swift, once her visible best friend, has offered nothing more than vague Instagram quotes about truth and courage. And while Blake's legal team is reportedly preparing an aggressive strategy, the court of public opinion is not waiting for a judge to weigh in. The memes, the callouts, the exposes. They've already cast their verdict. Brigitte too is facing silence from allies who once celebrated her uniqueness. As France becomes more polarized politically, even moderate voices are distancing themselves. Suddenly her every move is interpreted as either elitist or manipulative. Her appearance at a recent state dinner wearing a custom Louis Vuitton gown was labeled tone-deaf in a viral editorial. Her role in advising Macron on education reform has been criticized by conservative voices as inappropriate interference. And the louder the criticism grows, the quieter her defenders become. It's a political version of what's happening to Blake, only cloaked in diplomacy. Instead of tabloid fury, what connects these stories and why this double serving matters is the way power and gender intersect. These are not mere PR mishaps or tabloid flukes. They're part of a broader cultural phenomenon where women who hold influence, be it through fame or proximity to power, are constantly subjected to shifting rules, double standards, and weaponized narratives. They are expected to be relatable, but not too real, graceful but never weak, powerful but never threatening. It's an impossible dance. And once they misstep, the consequences are swift. This is the moment to ask ourselves, what do we demand from women in the public eye? Do we allow them complexity or only perfection, and when they stumble or are merely perceived, do we give them space to recover, or do we relish in the spectacle of their downfall? As both Blake and Brigitte navigate these turbulent times, they are also redefining what it means to survive a public crisis. Whether through silence, legal strategy, or sheer presence, they are both refusing to disappear, even as the world tries to write them off. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most radical thing they can do. Part of the spectacle surrounding Blake, Lively and Brigitte Macron is that they are symbols, projections really of different, yet equally loaded societal archetypes. Blake, the all-American Hollywood sweetheart, represents the fantasy of the effortless woman. Beautiful, witty, successful. A mother, a wife, a fashion icon, and yet somehow always relatable. Brigitte, on the other hand, stands as a cultural contradiction, a woman who defied social norms by marrying a man 24 years her junior and stepping into one of the most publicly scrutinized roles in European politics with poise and decisiveness. But as we've seen before, and as we're seeing now with extraordinary clarity, symbols can't survive real-world complexity. The second they act outside their assigned script, the backlash is instant, intense, and often irreversible. For Blake, the unraveling began subtly, a few tone-deaf posts here, an awkward interview there, but exploded into public consciousness when her name was directly linked to a lawsuit that questioned not only her integrity but her loyalty, honesty, and even the authenticity of her friendships. The lawsuit filed by Justin Baldoni has exposed more than legal claims. It has pulled back the velvet curtain on a Hollywood that is far more ruthless than glamorous. Leaked court documents suggest that Blake may have been involved in a back-channel strategy to discredit Baldoni, or at least that she knew more than she let on. What's worse for her is the suggestion that she was operating behind the scenes to manipulate narratives in the press, using allies in the media to push a story that painted her as a victim while undermining those who stood in her way. These are serious allegations, not legally perhaps, but reputationally. In an industry where perception is currency, Blake's value is plummeting. Brigitte, meanwhile, is not facing lawsuits, but she is navigating a different kind of courtroom: the global press and the deeply skeptical French public. The criticism against her has taken a more insidious form. She's being accused of undermining the image of the French presidency, not through scandal but through visibility. A recent editorial in Le Monde critiqued her growing media presence, questioning whether it was appropriate for a First Lady, a title that holds no official political weight in France, to be hosting diplomatic dinners, issuing statements on national education, and playing a visible role during state visits. Critics claim she's overstepping. Supporters say she's simply redefining the role. But as public fatigue with the Macron administration grows amid economic protests and political polarization, Brigitte is being used as a lightning rod, a symbol of elite disconnect. Just like Blake, her presence is now being reinterpreted as problematic by the very public that once adored her. The coverage of both women shares eerie similarities. Tone matters. In Blake's case, headlines are no longer kind. They speak of meltdowns, distancing friends, and radio silence from previously vocal supporters. Photos of her looking tired, makeup free, or even simply serious are used to suggest emotional collapse. In Brigitte's case, the language is couched in diplomatic politeness but no less cutting phrases, like increasing influence, growing concern, and strained public patience pepper op-eds and news broadcasts. And while their circumstances differ drastically, the underlying message is the same: you were welcome, as long as you didn't challenge the limits of your image. Online, the backlash is louder and far more cruel. For every sympathetic voice on social media, there are hundreds mocking, analyzing, dissecting. Threads on Reddit debate whether Blake has lost control of her PR team. Others share side-by-side comparisons of her public appearances, theorizing whether her outfits are coded messages about her deteriorating relationships in Hollywood. Brigitte is similarly scrutinized with French Twitter and increasingly global political discourse, buzzing with conspiracies about her role behind Emmanuel Macron's decisions. Was she advising him on policy? Was she the one who insisted on that controversial education reform proposal? Was she simply too present? These questions aren't about accountability. They're about power, and more specifically about discomfort with women who have it. What's especially disturbing is how quickly these narratives metastasize. Blake can't appear in public without her body language being dissected. A simple hand gesture becomes a symbol of regret. A half smile gets read as shame. Brigitte can't attend a public function without fashion analysts and political experts alike questioning whether her choice of color was too bold or too masculine for the occasion. They've both been reduced to symbols, pawns in cultural debates about femininity, influence, and visibility, and the world, especially the online world, is watching with glee. But beyond the spectacle, there's something deeper happening. These two women are facing the modern equivalent of a public stoning. Only now the stones are headlines, hashtags, and viral clips. And what unites their experience is a shared reality of gender double standards. The behaviors for which they're being vilified, ambition, confidence, public visibility, influence, are celebrated in their male counterparts. Ryan Reynolds, despite being connected to Blake's controversies, remains largely untouched. Emmanuel Macron's own political blunders don't seem to inspire the same venom reserved for his wife. It's the classic dichotomy: men act, women scheme; men lead, women manipulate; men recover, women fall. There's also an unmistakable racial and class dynamic at play in how these stories are told. Both Blake and Brigitte are white, wealthy, and extremely privileged, and yet even they are not immune to the narrative machine that chews up women. Once they cross some invisible threshold of acceptability, if this is what happens to them, what hope is there for women with fewer resources, less fame, or no PR teams to buffer the blows? The spectacle of their unraveling is part of a wider cultural obsession with control, specifically the control of feminine visibility. Society continues to demand women be successful but humble, visible but never dominant, elegant but never vain, flawed but never messy. What's ironic is that both Blake and Brigitte have long understood the power of optics. They've each spent years carefully curating their image, their brand, their story. Blake built an empire off the perfect life aesthetic for children, a famous husband, a seamless balance of career and family. Brigitte crafted her own image as a modern European first lady, intelligent, sophisticated, stylish, and deeply involved in her husband's journey. But now both of them are being told that the very images they curated are no longer welcome. Not because they failed, but because the audience changed. And yet this isn't the end of either of them. If anything, the next chapter could be their most defining. Because public narrative is not permanent, it mutates. And while the initial wave of backlash is brutal, it's also a test. If Blake can weather the current storm, maintain her composure, present a united front with Reynolds, and offer some kind of authentic reckoning without descending into defensiveness, she might actually come out the other side more complex and paradoxically more respected. Likewise, Brigitte Macron, who has already endured decades of public commentary on her age, her marriage, and her role, is no stranger to reinvention. If she chooses to lean into her role as a political actor instead of retreating from it, she may very well redefine what it means to be a first lady in the modern world. But make no mistake, the road ahead will not be easy. The press is watching, social media is waiting, and the smallest misstep could be magnified into a scandal. The only way forward may be through, and through means enduring the noise, the mockery, and the exhaustion of constantly being misunderstood. It means understanding that the people calling for your downfall will likely never be satisfied, and that the only redemption that matters is the one you define for yourself. For now, the headlines continue, the whispers persist, the knives remain sharpened, but Blake Lively and Brigitte Macron are still standing, bruised perhaps, but not broken. And maybe that's the real twist in this story, not the fall, but the refusal to disappear. As the spotlight intensifies and the digital mob continues its chorus of judgment, one thing becomes clear: what Blake Lively and Brigitte Macron are now enduring isn't a moment, it's a reckoning, a cultural sorting. A harsh lesson in how power, when held by women, is tolerated only when it remains soft-edged and non-threatening until it isn't, until ambition shows, until flaws leak through the PR, until silence starts looking like strategy. Then and only then does the world pull out its ledger and begin tallying every perceived offense. This is where Blake and Brigitte now stand, not as isolated figures, but as avatars of a deeper discomfort that modern society has with powerful women who refuse to retreat. In Blake's world, Hollywood is less a place and more a machine. And that machine has for years operated with unspoken rules about lickability, timing, and optics. For someone like Blake, who ascended from teen drama stardom to become one of the most recognizable faces in pop culture, the key was always control. Control over what she posted, what she wore, who she was seen with, even what parts of her motherhood journey were shared and when. And that's exactly what's being weaponized against her now. Critics argue she's been too controlled, that the woman who once charmed reporters with her bubbly laugh and Instagram-perfect baking stories is in fact a master manipulator, that her wholesome image was always a mask hiding colder calculations. And whether or not that's true almost doesn't matter anymore, because once that seed of doubt is planted, it grows fast in the fertile soil of public suspicion, and the silence is deafening. That's what many observers can't help but notice. The A-list friends who once flooded Blake's posts with emojis and praise have grown uncharacteristically quiet. Where is Gigi Hadid? Where is Taylor Swift? Where are the Girl Squad defenders, who once rallied with slogans about feminism and solidarity? Their absence speaks volumes, not necessarily about guilt but about risk. In Hollywood, public loyalty is transactional, and Blake's brand is now considered radioactive. Even Ryan Reynolds, master of self-deprecating humor and quick Twitter comebacks, has avoided direct mention of the unfolding chaos. Publicists are advising distance. Brands are watching carefully. The industry is calculating. Blake's fate isn't sealed, but it is teetering. Contrast that with Brigitte Macron, whose world revolves not around movie premieres, but national policy, diplomatic dinners, and the ever-volatile theater of European politics. Brigitte is not a stranger to scrutiny. From the moment she emerged as Emmanuel Macron's partner, a woman who had once been his high school teacher who broke from her prior life to support his political rise, she has been controversial. Tabloids mocked her age. Political rivals sneered at her influence. Pundits questioned her intentions. And yet she persevered, carving out a space that was neither traditional spouse nor fully political actor. But lately that space has become increasingly unstable, with Macron's approval ratings slipping and France experiencing a spike in political unrest. Brigitte has once again become a convenient target, not just because of who she is, but because of what she represents: the idea that women can operate in the background of power and still shape it. The criticism against Brigitte has morphed. It's no longer just about her marriage or her age. It's about her visibility, her involvement, her elegance. A recent viral article accused her of being too presidential, a barely veiled suggestion that she's overstepping. Another far-right publication referred to her as the unelected shadow of the LEC. Even mainstream outlets have begun to scrutinize her role in policy meetings, her attendance at diplomatic events, and her influence over Macron's notoriously insular inner circle. The irony, of course, is that male political spouses who engage publicly are often celebrated. But with Brigitte, that engagement is interpreted as threat, as disruption, as something unnatural. And just like Blake, Brigitte is learning that public favor is fleeting, that the same press that once lauded her as the embodiment of French sophistication now circles like vultures, dissecting every choice she makes. Her wardrobe, once admired, is now used as evidence of tone-deaf elitism. Her speeches, once praised, are now picked apart for hints of overreach. Her silence, once considered dignified, now reads as complicit. It is the textbook evolution of backlash. The higher the pedestal, the more brutal the fall. Yet both women refuse to disappear. And that's part of what makes their current situations so volatile, because neither is willing to apologize for simply existing at the intersection of influence and femininity. And that resistance, subtle though it may be, is infuriating to a culture that still demands repentance from women who dare to be complicated, especially when those women once wore crowns. The backlash also reveals something deeper: the collective addiction to witnessing the collapse of an ideal. Blake was never just an actress. She was a lifestyle brand, a fantasy, a walking Pinterest board. Brigitte was never just a first lady. She was a cultural provocation, a rejection of ageist tropes. And now that both have been double-served, Blake by legal documents and former allies, Brigitte by the press and political rivals, the public is feasting on the drama, hoping for a confession, a breakdown, a televised reckoning, but neither has given. That satisfaction, what we're witnessing is the beginning of a cultural pivot, one where visibility comes with increasing costs. Blake's legal drama may yet be resolved or settled quietly, but her brand may never fully recover. Not because she committed a crime, but because she lost control of her story. And in 2025, that's the ultimate sin in celebrity culture. If the public suspects you've been curating to perfectly, for too long they will dig, and if they find cracks they will explode them. Brigitte's reckoning is more existential. She's being asked to shrink, to return to the decorative First Lady mold, to be supportive not central, to stand behind not beside. And that request in a woman who's done neither is the real threat. Her refusal is what makes her dangerous in the eyes of her critics. It would be easy to write this off as the natural arc of fame and public life, but it's not. It's a gender drama deeply tied to how we construct narratives around women. Men in similar positions face criticism, yes, but rarely this intimate, this personal, this focused on tone and facial expressions and imagined intentions. The obsession with Blake's true motives, the fascination with Brigitte's real influence. These are not political or legal debates, these are morality plays. And the women at the center are forced to play roles they never auditioned for. But here's the twist: both may yet endure, and not just endure, adapt. Blake, if she chooses to reframe the narrative, could reposition herself not as a fallen idol, but as a woman navigating the brutal ecosystem of fame and fallout. She could break the silence, take control, rebuild not the fantasy but something more human. And in doing so, she might finally connect in a way she never did when her life looked too perfect to be true. Brigitte, for her part, could lean in even further, use the criticism as fuel, redefine the First Lady model not as a backdrop but as a presence, articulate, unshaken, involved. France may not be ready, but history often favors the women who force readiness. Ultimately, this story, this double serving, is a test, not just for Blake and Brigitte, but for the culture that made them. Are we capable of evolving in our understanding of public women? Can we move beyond the simplistic binary of heroine versus villain? Are we willing to accept that influence comes in many forms, and that it often makes us uncomfortable when women wield it unapologetically? Because if we can't answer yes to those questions, then we're doomed to keep playing the same game. Uplift, idolize, doubt, tear down, move on, repeat. Blake and Brigitte are not the first. They won't be the last, but they are the moment. Two women in the crosshairs of judgment, one navigating Hollywood, the other navigating history. Both proving in their silence and survival that power is never granted, it's taken, it's held, and it's protected at a cost.